I really quickly. I'm going to give you a lot of content and resources at the end. So first I wanted to talk about causes of burnout. You're probably familiar with all of these. A lot of times people think that the like a heavy workload is the main cause of burnout, but there's also a lot of other things. Like if you have a lack of autonomy in your job, where you are micromanaged or um, don't get to decide what you get to do. That can be really stressful. Lack of reward, like if you're not compensated enough or not appreciated. Relationships are often the biggest source of stress in work situations, also in personal life. Fairness, especially like for women of color, um, they may not be as well compensated or appreciated for doing lots of emotional labor or doing the same work that other people are doing. Or if people are experiencing a values mismatch between what they want to do and what they're actually doing. And this can happen a lot in our line of work where we're all going into these things as idealists and wanting to do a lot of help, but the job may not be aligned with that. And then this is just to acknowledge all of the craziness going on in the world at large, where it feels like we have fire and smoke in the room. And then we're still being asked to go on like normal, right? And a lot of people are not even um, not bothered by things or not talking about it. So it's like people are just like, oh, everything's fine, but we know that it's not. There's a great little video here on moral injury, but I'll just talk about it, where the author talks about how burnout isn't really about having too much work, but it's about moral injury. And that means people who, um, have made great sacrifices to want to be helping humanity, especially people who are in environment, healthcare, education, who, are sacrificing like a better income and lots of time to be able to do this. But then the industry really fails them in a lot of ways, and they find that they're not able to do what they train to do. The system isn't supporting them, and so that's like the moral injury in the way of hitting at your core values, and something that you thought was going to happen didn't happen. And I feel like we're all experiencing that with the government, um, and like the society that we place trust on and have institutions that we thought were serving us are now totally turned upside down. And just we're seeing such basic things being challenged and overturned. It's a really distressing situation to be in, not because we're like personally dealing with it, but just because of the psychological impact. So, I want to talk about white supremacy culture versus self-care. So, a lot of the ways that we operate in society gives us so much stress and oppression, um, even without all the craziness going on. And this especially applies if you have a marginalized identity. But culture is something that we are living in constantly and may not be aware of. And in our capitalist, patriarchal, etc. culture, um, it often operates with a lot of these characteristics. For example, urgency, just constantly things having to be done quickly and with these deadlines. Um, so the opposite of that would be, slowing down and setting boundaries on our time. Perfectionism, where we're constantly expected to do things perfectly, and there being only one right way of doing things. And if we don't do it right, then we're punished for it, or oftentimes the punishment is internalized, so we give ourselves a hard time for not being perfect. And the opposite of that is self-compassion, compassion for other people, right? Permission to learn from our mistakes, or having multiple right ways of doing things. Worship of the written word. Um, this is something that like going through school is really impressed on us that things only have value if they're written down and we have to follow rules to the letter. And people who can think quickly and speak quickly and write well are rewarded more than people who have skills in communicating in other ways. Quantity over quality, right? Instead of enjoyment or care, like we're constantly trying to produce more. Um, Denial and defensiveness. So if we do have issues with what is going on, and bring it up to people who are in charge, we may be met with denial and defensiveness, or we experience that in ourselves, where like we may experience um, like it's difficult to have threats to our ego, and we haven't really been trained in how to deal with criticism constructively, and so there's denial and defensiveness on our part. Um, Individualism, right? Tons of individualism in our society, from the top to just how we work on a regular basis, including like the merit system, which is often not based on merit. Right to comfort. So that's more about like white people feeling entitled to comfort, and that like talking about racism or confronting racism gives them discomfort, and so they resort to denial and defensiveness. Progress is bigger or more, um, right? Just like trying to defining success as more like more funding, more members, more all of the things, rather than like quality relationships. Fear of open conflict, right? Let's see, paternalism. So that's like determining for other people what we think is good for them rather than letting them determine for themselves. So all of these are characteristics that they're internal, and they're also interpersonal and at the institutional societal levels. Um, and to dismantle white supremacy culture, patriarchy, capitalism, really have to look at the opposite of each of these characteristics, which all have to do with qualities of self-care. So we're going to talk more about that. Um, so external versus internal self-care. Well, self-care has become this huge billion-dollar industry. We're marketed all kinds of things to help us feel better. But a lot of those things can be external self-care, rather than internal self-care. So, external things are like the bubble baths and candles and aromatherapy that like we all get sold, and which are like wonderful things. Um, but they're sort of more meant as like temporary comforts and not as long-term solutions to burnout or oppression. So the internal self-care is more about like self-compassion, setting boundaries, living with more authenticity. Um, the external self-care are hedonic, so it's like the nice meals, the chocolates, the bubble baths, and the eudaimonic well-being is more about a holistic sense of well-being, um, that's spiritual, that's emotional, not just physical. Um, Instead of treating the symptoms, like we need to treat the sources of burnout. Instead of strategies that are external, we need strategies that are internal. External self-care can often be distractions or temporary escapes from problems, whereas solving our long-term burnout requires us to confront our problems and make difficult choices. So if we go to a yoga retreat, that's a wonderful getaway. Um, but if we don't figure out how we're going to solve the problems in our life, then we'll come back and all the problems are still there and we're still stressed out as before. So external self-care is not really focused on changing the status quo, whereas the internal self-care will look at, like what is actually going on in a life that needs to be different for you to feel better. Um, One size fits all versus self-determined and unique to you, right? This external self-care can also become another thing to do where people are like, okay, now I've got to go running, I've got to eat my healthy food, and um, that may just become another thing that stresses us out. Um, Whereas the internal self-care is more focused on principles to decide this to guide decision making so that we can live every moment of our lives more aligned with our values, with more self-compassion, and um, yeah, just feeling better from the inside out. Okay. And lead towards life transformation, hopefully, and taking us in a place where we're living more aligned with our values. Okay, yeah. So a lot of what I really like to focus on is authenticity. So these have to do with questions of, what brings me joy? What do I value? What do I really want to be doing? Um, there are a lot of tips out there you can get about, how to be more efficient, productive, or rested. But I think unless we really consider these questions, we're not going to get to the sources of our burnout. Um, and sometimes, like it may not be possible for us to be living our joy all the time, right? Like we have to feed our families and do our jobs. Just like we can just think about, what are the ways we can incorporate more of that? If you only have control of 30% of your time, like how do we maximize that 30% of our time to um, have joy, to do the things that we value? Yeah, maybe cultivating, things that are important to us. Like for me, it's like my writing projects or developing relationships. Okay. So, self care involves the internal process of learning to treat yourself with compassion, setting boundaries, and making choices that bring you closer to yourself and living a life aligned with your values. And we're really going to look at these 5 strategies: self compassion, boundaries, being intentional, community, and movement building um, for the moment that we are in. So, self compassion is really like foundational for this work. Um, we have a lot of difficult things that we have to face in our life. Um, but if we can take away the things that are self-imposed, then that will eliminate the part that's not so necessary for us to also burden ourselves with. And we can do that by bringing more self-compassion. So if we are someone who says things to ourselves like, I can't do anything right, or I'm such a failure, or I made that mistake again, why can't I just get over it, suck it up? Then we may be struggling with self-compassion. And I know that like when there's a moment of failure, we can all have a tendency to have these moments. But we're just trying to be aware of when that happens and then turn that around towards statements that are more compassionate. So things like, everybody makes mistakes, or it's okay to not feel okay. I'm still learning. It's hard for you, my love. What do I need today? Like right now. And maybe meeting some of those needs that you're feeling. I also heard on a podcast this woman who said, I give myself 7 chances a day to fail at some things. And if I haven't gotten to 7, it's still a pretty good day. I'm doing okay. Like if I've made 7 mistakes, then maybe I need to step back and take a nap. But it's normal to have stumbles and for things not to go well. And hopefully we can just take it in with some self-compassion, some sense of humor, and not be too hard on ourselves for not things not going right. Boundaries. So super important for preventing burnout. Um, just like the thought of burnout is to me is like overstretching ourselves in ways that we weren't equipped to handle. So looking at all the different ways that we can set boundaries: physical, emotional, intellectual, time, material, spiritual, sexual, um, and like to evaluate, are there places where you're being too stretched? Are there places where you need to take back some of those things for yourself? So one way to do that is prioritizing the most important things. I just went through this course with people on setting goals, and we have so many areas in our lives, and we have like 20 goals. but what are the most important one, two, or three things that you want to accomplish? And then the other things, are kind of on the back burner. So just remember to focus on that and not be overwhelmed by all of the things. Right. So we can think about it as reducing the course load. Like when we were in grad school, you might have 4 courses a semester, and you should not be taking on a fifth course because that's just going to overwhelm you and you're not going to end up doing well at any of these things. So just knowing that you have room for 4. And then like if you're doing an internship, maybe you're only taking 3 courses and then the internship is one. Because you've got to have time to eat and to work out and see your friends. So defining what your 4 classes are and sticking with that. And then, sometimes you have more things you want to do. It can be the next semester, right? Next semester you get to have new 4 courses. So some ways for setting boundaries around doing less, having a high bar for saying yes. Um, are you someone who tends to say yes a lot? Have a hard time saying no. So before you say yes, think about, does it add a lot of value to my life? Does it provide something that I don't currently have and want? What would I replace to do this? Will it add to my stress? Saying no more often. What will happen if I say no? If I can't say no, could it be I say later? Implementing quotas for projects, right? So this is a way where you can say yes, but not go beyond your boundaries. Like, I will go to X number of conferences this year. And when you've scheduled those out, like you're not going to do more. Or I will participate on X number of committees. I will review X number of papers. I will write 1 article every 3 months. And just know that you don't have the ability to do more than that. And if people want to ask you, they're like, okay, this is my quota for the year. And if you want me to do more, it will have to be next year. Okay, so if this is like what your calendar looks like, think how maybe what can you take off of this calendar? Filter it through the lens of what do I value, what's important, and what's urgent. And then, you've got to like schedule the parts that um, are for you, like date night or, self-care time or yeah, naps, like putting them on your schedule uh, rather than just like collapsing once your workday is done. Okay, managing distractions. So this is a way to bring a little more work hygiene into our workday, like cleaning the desk in the room. That can really help with just making our minds a little less distracted. A clean room can really help with focus. Putting the phone in another room. Yeah, I can definitely impose some limits on being on the phone when you need to be focusing. Using an internet blocking app, mm, like this app called Leech Block, where you can set a time for it to block apps that you distract yourself with. And then during that time, you cannot navigate to those websites. Um, Opening a new browser. So that's like if I have 100 tabs at the top of my browser, those can be distracting because I'll like click on them when, I'm doing a hard task and it becomes hard. So I find that if I just pull into a new browser, that helps me stay focused. Using music to help with focus. So I like that too, or something like non-lyrical that also now it's become a habit where I feel like if I had this type of music on, it means I'm deep working. Okay. So being okay with boredom. Um, so like now we have so many ways where we don't have to deal with boredom, right? We can get on our phones and look at social media. We can look at the news. Some studies suggest that knowledge workers check their email every 6 minutes. So that's not really conducive to doing deep work. And with every email, it's like a different project. So the switching back and forth really tires out our brains. So some ways to do that, like don't check email. Um, can you just close that for a bit to focus on your work? Okay, don't reach for your phone, right? Like we talked about putting it in a different room. Don't check social media, don't check the news. And instead, like do some things like look out the window for a bit or do some stretches, take some breaths and just close your eyes. Okay, just letting the rest actually happen. And as the doctor says, it's good for your eyes to rest your eyes after looking at your screen every hour or so. Oh, it's like not going forward. Okay. Since emails are a really big part of our lives for knowledge workers, want to especially talk about how to minimize emails. So one is to turn off email notifications so you don't get a ding every time you receive email. Pause emails. So like in the Gmail world, there's a pause inbox button. I think you have to download their driver to have it. But this has been really helpful. Um, Ideally, like I would pause my inbox at the end of the workday and then unpop and leave it paused until noon the next day. So you're not like spending your morning lost in your inbox and you can use the best time of your day to focus on your important projects. And then you'll deal with your emails later in the day. So nothing is coming in. You're not tempted to check it while you're in a deep work. Okay. Can you check your email only 2, 3 times a day? Not every 6 minutes. Okay. Like block out some times where you're going to do that. Prioritize and filter emails. So that way you can set them up to go into different boxes with labels. Deleting the ones you don't need, like as soon as you see them. Responding to quick emails as soon as you read them. Only dealing with it once, and then unsubscribe from stuff you don't look at. Okay. Um, there are ways to reduce email back and forth, right? So the idea here is just to, when you do send an email, to give people as much information as possible so that they can give you a good response and eliminate a lot of back and forth. Um, so instead of when would you like to meet, say, are you available at all of these following times? Right? Instead of do you have any thoughts? Like, could you please look over the proposal, do this specific thing by this time? Um, you might utilize office hours, if instead of having lots of email back and forths, like you could give people a time, like I'm going to be available between 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock for people to have a quick call. You could just like jump onto Zoom to talk with me. Um, that could be a good strategy to eliminate a lot of emails. And it's not just like the time you're spending in the email, it's also like when you're waiting for the email that adds to your mental load. Um, so this is a way to take care of that as well. Okay. Yeah, and then, just in your off time as well, trying to reduce the mental overload of the news cycle, social media. You might take to periodic tech baths, tech Sabbath, where like you could go for a whole day on a weekend, perhaps without um, checking things on your phone, not doom scrolling, especially before bed, and having some healthy analog activities that can replace that, spending time in nature with pets, children, doing art, reading, lots of options. But having some go-tos uh, will really help with not automatically defaulting to the doom scrolling. Okay, now getting into being intentional, right? So all of that was more about like setting boundaries and keeping at bay the distractions. Um, Developing a work ritual. So I find that this also helps to set a positive tone for the work day. It makes works a little more enjoyable. Okay. So before your work day, you might get some of your wellness habits taken care of, like hydrating, meditating, exercising. And then before you start work, you could clean the desk, review a calendar, make a to-do list, say some affirmations, turn on the music, maybe light a candle, set a timer. And then that helps to um, send the signal that, okay, now this is work time. Right. So planning your week, um, looking at your week at the beginning of the week, and thinking about like what are your top priorities, top three priorities for the week. Block out times to do those. You're gonna block out times for deep work, block out times for shallow work, which is like administrative stuff that doesn't require a lot of focus, time for self-care, time for relationships. Just blocking them out will really help to make sure that it happens and your day is not just chaos of responding to everything. Um, and it helps if these things can happen at the same time every day. Like say you do deep work every day from 10 to 12. You know, if you have that habit, then it's easier to get into the deep work. Yeah, so that's time blocking. You want to take that week and then block it out as a day as well. So this one shows like a day where we have all sorts of things just interrupting each other, you know, email, then meetings, then social media, then work, then more email, meetings, etc. So this sort of thing is mentally taxing, where we're switching between things all the time and probably not very productive. But if you do consolidate things so that it's like a big block for your deep work and then a big block for meetings, a block for email here at the beginning, in the middle, and then at the end, um, then you're doing less switching back and forth. You're able to focus more, and you probably end up working less and have time later in the day to chill out. Okay, so batching is another way to reduce the context switching. So doing tasks that are similar together. You might group tasks by project, by cognitive function, or where you do them. So like you could even designate like a whole day. Like Monday is my proposal day. Tuesday is the uh, um, uh, implementation day. Uh, Friday, I'm catching up on meetings and stuff. So just doing things that are similar together makes it easy to go through them. So like I might do all the deep work in the block where I designated for that, the shallow work, and then I have like my chores around the house that I might like slot into some breaks or things that are doing outside, like doing all of the things outside at the same time. That's also environmental, saves on your fuel. Pomodoro method. So here we're using a method where you concentrate for 25 minutes and then have a break for 5 minutes and then concentrate for 25 minutes, have a break, so forth. And you like set a timer so that it goes through these increments. Um, it's just like a really motivational thing where like you feel like, okay, I'm going to concentrate just for 25 minutes. I don't need to be distracted by things. And usually I find that it takes me 20 minutes just to get into a project, and then I just want to keep going for the rest of the hour. And then after an hour, I'll take 5 minute break. Using time savers. So these are some technology tricks that could be helpful, like sending voice recordings instead of text messages, using text expander. I've been using the software called Breevy for many years, where it lets you set up a system of abbreviations. Like this picture here is a window into my Breevy, where like my abbreviation is Antioch, and when I type that, it it gives me the whole Antioch Center for Climate Preparedness and Community Resilience. So if that's a word I write often, I don't need to write the whole thing. And I just have so many abbreviations set up that it just makes typing a lot faster. Using scheduling apps, time tracker. So Toggle is a popular app now to help you block out your time, your day, and to track how much time you're spending doing each thing. Using templates in Gmail. So this is also something I utilize a lot where like I send the same email to a bunch of different people. Then instead of copying and pasting, I have the template in Gmail. Right, there's a Pomodoro app for you to utilize that method. And using project management systems like TickTick, Asana, or Trello to manage your projects. Pocket is an app that allows you to save things you're going to read on the web um, into its app, and then you can read them later. Okay. And now there are all these AI tools that are rapidly evolving to enhance people's productivity. Like I've been using them for research, writing, editing. Like I'm finding it really helpful. I use it to create a cover letter. Um, you can like do presentations. I mean, it's just amazing all the things that it can do now. So recommend learning some of these. Okay. And then implementing a shutdown ritual, right? Do you have something that signals an end to a day and then allows you to actually use your evenings to recharge instead of just thinking about work all the time? So you can set an alarm for when you want the workday to end. Uh, then you're going to respond to any urgent messages that needs to be taken care of. You look at your plan for tomorrow. You acknowledge yourself for accomplishments. You know, assess your day, like what went well, what didn't go well, and then put your computer to sleep or just completely shut it down. Um, and then like go for a walk, take a shower, make dinner, like something that takes you out of the office and transitions you to personal time. All right. Well, moving on to community. Um, yeah, so isolation is a big stressor. It's shown to increase anxiety and depression, especially with everything going on. Having community can be such a lifesaver. So, even if we're just having Zoom meetings with people, we can try some deeper conversation prompts. So instead of how are you, we can say, what has been a highlight of your week? Or what are you looking forward to? What's something interesting you learned recently? What's something you're struggling with? What are you working on? If you're in person, it's even better to try to have a deeper conversation with these kinds of prompts. And it can be a great way to just like connect with people a little bit before you get onto business. Um, or like on a weekend, you might have a longer conversation with these prompts. Okay. Don't be shy about getting help. What are some ways that you can um, uh, designate outsource your workload. One way might be like paying for apps, like paying for the AI tools or productivity apps that will be helpful. Can you work with a coach or a therapist? Um, I paid somebody to help me edit my manuscript, and it was helpful not just in her edits, but also it motivated me to really finish the manuscript. Having accountability partners for things that like habits that you might have a hard time doing. Body doubling. So that's like co-working, or even people who say like listening to a podcast about the thing that they're doing. It's like having someone else who is doing the same thing can keep us accountable and on track. Okay. Movement building, right? So in the world we're in, um, doing something to contribute to positive change can be really great for our mental health instead of just agonizing over what is happening. And there are different ways to do it. uh, we may not all want to be marching 6 hours in the freezing cold. Maybe we're the type of person who are better at building the world that we want to see, creating a positive vision. We're working in the healing side of things, um, or like the more intellectual side, like writing, creating art, um, reform. So like with the activism that I do, it's mostly calling our members of Congress and working within the system. So finding, what feels positive and inspiring to you and contributing to the movement. Um, so this is an invitation. I do this initiative called Activism Hour. Um, we meet every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's a co-working meeting where we do some actions uh, around the current events. So we call our members of Congress, or we write a letter to the editor, connect with activists, we'll write letters to voters. So it's just like an hour in the week where we get some of our things done to be a good citizen. Um, we have a WhatsApp and Signal group for people to connect, and we chat about current events. So this has been a really good outlet for me, to do some actions in a way that doesn't take over my life. Like it's a bounded amount of things I can do. And like calling our members of Congress, it's so fast. Like it takes really like 2 minutes. And emailing them, I have them saved in my browser, so just everything gets filled out super fast. It's amazing how much I get done in 45 minutes. So here's some extra resources if you want to look into them. Lots of inspiring books about self-care and preventing burnout, how to do nothing. And then these are some great books on the environment specifically. Catherine Hayhoe's Hope and Healing, Saving Us, Hope and Healing in Divided World, All We Can Save, The Overstory, Creating Sweetgrass. These are just texts that I've continued to return to um, in dealing with like climate change and the ecological crisis that are hopeful. And we'll share the slides with you so you can find them. Okay. And then one more resource, I'm doing a course called the Refresh starting in April. I just wrapped up the one called the Reset, which is for January. And it's harnessing the energy of spring for a fresh start. So it's a 5-week program where we build good habits, um, set some goals, create a strategic plan, and think about um, accountability and implementation in our lives so that we can have the life that we want to live. Really like planning um, and intentionally trying to manifest the life that we want to live. So if you're interested in that, I invite you to join. Just get in contact with me. So that's the end of the official presentation. I think we have a few more minutes for questions if you like.
I don't have a question, Clara,